Sometimes brands miss the mark in their marketing because they produce something that is actually worth a lot of attention, but they decide to target, as far as their audience, only a specific portion of the potential audience of that product. And I believe the Fujifilm X-M5 is a product that is kind of a victim of this pattern. Why? Let's find out in this video, but before doing that, let me disclose a couple of things. One is that Fujifilm Italia sent me this camera to test and review. However, I don't get to keep it. They don't get to know what I think about it before you guys do. And as usually, I'll try to be as honest as possible. Whatever I'm going to say in this video is my thoughts and my thoughts only. This video is sponsored by Audio, my go-to licensed music platform since a few months ago. I find their service to be impeccable, and they keep adding music on a daily basis. It's very easy to use, it's very smart in finding what you're looking for, and based also on your previous research, they build the knowledge of your account, and they propose stuff that you may like. They also are implementing AI in helping finding what you need. Also, a lot of stuff. It's very well done. I don't want to spend too much time discussing about that. I'll suggest you give it a try. And I also suggest you to give it a try because I have a 70% discount code, which is SAVE70, which will allow you to try it out without spending too much money. I'm very curious to know what you guys think. Let me know. But again, give it a try. Now let's talk about the camera. And let's start with the price. This camera over here, again, the X-M5, comes body only, of course, at $799. US dollar, of course. And comes a little bit more with the 15 to 45 lens kit, which is not bad. Trust me, it's not bad. And the cost factor has to be clear from the get-go because, of course, being this tiny and this inexpensive, some sacrifices had to be made. However, if you bear with me, if you stick with me with the duration of the video, you would realize that this camera is by far the least sacrificed camera that you can find in its price range. And I want to start with the body design first, because many misconceptions about this camera, in my opinion, are based on reports from someone who hasn't even used the camera yet, or they're based on just looking at the spec sheet and looking at the pictures of the camera without trying to understand what this camera is and what this camera is capable of. Now, once you take this camera out of the box, which by the way is the new box, the one which basically has nothing and it's made of recycled paper and without plastic on the inside. It's a new decision that Fujifilm made to be more eco-friendly. So you can plot to them. You cannot really believe how small this camera is, how tiny this camera is, and how lightweight this camera is. And despite that, it shares the same X mount that you can find in cameras such as the X-H2S that is recording me, the X-T5, and all that jazz. Also, considering the price and the lightweight, you may lead to believe that this camera is going to be built super cheap. It would feel like a plastic box and it would feel like crap in your hands. The reality, at least the black version that I have, feels pretty solid. It doesn't feel cheap at all. I mean, it's not the X-H2S, of course, but it doesn't feel cheap at all. Of course, it's small, but that's a different story, but it doesn't scream, I'm gonna break tomorrow. When it comes to the sensor, there's really nothing to discover about the sensor. If you've seen what the X-T3, X-T4, XS10, XS20, XE4 have been capable of, you know what to expect from this camera, because this sensor is the same sensor that was first launched with the X-T3 and has equipped almost all the Fujifilm's camera since then. So it's a 6 years old sensor, but honestly, it's not just a sensor. This is the sensor that made proper hybrid cameras affordable. This is the sensor, together with the X-T3, that brought the concept of hybrid cameras to the masses. And this sensor has aged pretty well. It still kicks ass. Now let's address the elephant in the room, because the most notable compromise to get the camera this small and this inexpensive is the lack of a viewfinder. If you see the back of the camera, you don't have a viewfinder. You only have a screen, okay, which is here in this case is flipped, which is a spoiler for what's to come. But for some, the lack of a viewfinder is a no-go. It's a deal breaker. For me, it's not. And there's a couple of reasons for that. This camera was designed to be pocketable, small, lightweight, and mostly for an audience that hasn't used a viewfinder in their life once. Because they're used to watch to the rear screen of their phone, they're used to watch in the rear screen of their GoPro or action camera, call it whatever you want. So none of these people have really had experience with a viewfinder. So for the target of this camera, or part of the target of this camera, this is not going to be a big deal. But even for me, I'm very used to use a viewfinder. If you get the purpose of this camera, it's not a big deal anyways. Maybe it's because I've been shooting with the Ricoh GR3X for the last year or so. So I really got to use a camera without a viewfinder, a camera that was very small and pocketable. And I came to appreciate that compromise gave me a super small and pocketable camera. Well, you can think about this camera as a interchangeable lens Ricoh GR3X with the Fujifilm simulations. And I think that with lenses like this, the 18mm f2, which you see over here, or the 27mm f2.8, lenses these compact, this small, this non-existent if you want, this camera makes for a heck of a street photography kit, to the point where I think that Fujifilm should market it on a street photography edition and selling this camera together with the 18 and the 27. I believe that kit would sell like hotcakes, especially because it's impossible to find the 27 f2 and 8 anyways. But still, I believe that kit would sell incredibly well. The rear screen is decent. It's nothing to write home about, but it's not bad either. And I personally had zero issue shooting in, even under the bright sun. So even if it's not the best around, it is still a good screen. It does flip towards you, meaning that you can vlog with it, and we're going to talk about vlogging later in this video. And it's very easy to deploy at the when just a finger at the bottom of the camera. And once you open the screen, you see that you have the connection to the Fujifilm fan accessory that you can purchase in case you're concerned about overheating. Now, I personally didn't get the camera to overheat, but also it's December now. I've been using it throughout November, so it's not super warm. With the camera being so tiny like this, while you do have some external controls, you don't have the plethora of controls that you get with cameras such as the XS20, XT5, XH2S, and so on. There's no room for it. However, what Fujifilm didn't give up on is the joystick. Now, for a camera in this price range, this is probably a unique feature. I am not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it's a unique feature, but in this price range, you don't get the joystick. You usually have to fiddle with buttons and stuff like that. With this, you get the joystick, and the joystick is, in my opinion, a big factor in the usability of this camera. Because if it hadn't a joystick, it would have been very different to choose focus points and make the camera usable the way I want it, but probably the way you would want it to work. The only button that I find weird is the Q button that you see over here, because it's in between two dials. It's not easy to use, and to make it worse, it's also recessed. Now, the good thing about Fujifilm is that you can customize pretty much each button that you have, so you can definitely move the Q function to the AF, AL button, which is far easier to reach, and then leave something you don't use that often on the Q button on the top. But aside from that, I didn't have any issue with the position or the controls of the camera. On the top, you have the very divisive film simulation dial, which I believe for a camera like this makes a lot of sense because it's meant to be a camera for beginners. It's meant to be a camera for someone who's using a camera like that maybe for the first time. So if you don't have the simulation at really visible at the top of the camera, you may not even know that your camera has those. With that, you're gonna get curious and you're gonna start using them, and that's gonna give you an additional edge over others that don't have this possibility. You also have a PASM dial, which also has 4 custom settings. A filter that I don't like, but I mean it's not for me for sure. And you get the vlog setting. We're gonna talk about the vlog in a second, but it's not for me. You also get another general purpose dial on the back, which is easy to reach with your thumb, and a front dial, which is also clickable to also navigate some of the shooting parameters. So pretty good amount of controls. You also get a fully working hot shoe, which seems stupid to point out, but some cameras that cost a lot more, we're going to discuss about that later, have a cold shoe instead of a hot shoe. And in general, what you have is a pretty complete setup for a camera this small. The one thing that I hate, however, is on the bottom of the camera, the tripod mount over here is too close to the battery door. And basically, whenever you mount, even if you're mounting the smallest of the tripod plates, you're gonna be blocking your door, which means you don't get access to either the battery or the SD card. That, considering the fact that this camera is using the small battery, the NP126S, may be an issue because the battery doesn't last super long, although it's not dramatic either. What's gonna kill the battery is shooting a lot of video. I kind of realized that there isn't much room on the bottom of the camera anyways, and they couldn't get it centered because it basically ends up being under the sensor, and probably there's not enough room for that. However, it's still an annoyance. Not a big deal, but still an annoyance. The other big sacrifice that comes with the camera being this small and this inexpensive is the lack of a stabilization for the sensor. Now, this may be an issue for some. We're getting used to having cameras stabilized, and if your style of using the camera is very based on motion, especially in video, this may be an issue. However, if you look at the competitors, and we're going to talk about the competitors later, none of them in this price range is stabilized. Zero. No one is stabilized. Maybe you get a stabilized camera from 5-6 years ago that now is being sold to clear the warehouses, but modern cameras in this price range, none of them is stabilized. So while it may be a problem for some, that's what you have to live with a camera this inexpensive and this small. I also believe this camera was designed to be used mostly on a tripod. The reason I'm saying that is that this camera has all the connection that you may possibly want. It's got the micro HDMI port, it's got the USB-C port, and it's got your headphone jack. But all of those are on the right portion of the camera, which means the side where you handle the camera. So if you're connecting stuff, you're not going to be able to handle the camera anyways. And so that makes me think that at the end of the day, this was built to be used mostly on a tripod, mostly in a setup like this, for example, in which it works perfectly. The only input that isn't on the side of the camera is the microphone jack, which is on the rear top portion of the camera, which is here. In my opinion, that is a great choice by Fujifilm because not having a viewfinder, that position wouldn't get in the way of using the camera. It wouldn't get in the way of moving the screen. It wouldn't get in the way of doing anything that you need to do with this camera. And it does also allow not to have those cables to go on the side or in weird positions. To me, that is a very, very, very good position for the microphone jack. And so all in all, from a design standpoint, it was very hard to come up with something that makes more sense than what Fujifilm did. It's a very versatile camera. It's small, it's compact, it's lightweight, but it's powerful, and it almost fits in the palm of your hands. Now, this camera was marketed as a vlogging camera for content creators, and yes, it can be really good in that. It's also got the updated microphones that allows you to have more directional audio, but still, it's better to use a proper microphone. It's not gonna change your life. And again, when used with a stabilized lens like the 15 to 45 kit, you can definitely do some vlogging as you're walking, as you're moving, and stuff like that. You tell me how the audio is, because that's my main concern, and we gotta see how that works. Although I think an external microphone is still gonna do better when it comes to capturing audio. Now, the reality, in my opinion, is that those content creators that are using their phones to produce their stuff will probably not switch to a real camera. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the phone is always with you. Two, the screen on the phone is much bigger, which is a big plus. Three, with the use of AI, smartphones are taking content creation to the next level in a sense that makes it super easy to you to manage dynamic range, stabilization, removing and adding objects, virtual reality, and all of that. So I don't think there's a huge push from those people for a camera like this. And I am not one of those people, so I cannot talk to you about whether this camera is successful in attracting those people or not. I don't even have TikTok to begin with, so I am not that type of user. And for this specific reason, I'm not gonna stay here talking for hours about what you can or cannot do with the vlogging function and all those things. What I can tell you, however, is that a camera like this makes probably so much more sense for a guy like me than it does to those TikTokers, content creators that the camera was targeting to begin with. Why is that? This is an incredibly hybrid camera for a small studio like mine. I've been using it as main camera for my last 3-4 videos, I don't remember. I've been using it to record B-roll, I've been using it to record a lot of stuff. And it performed flawlessly. On a tripod, with a DZ interface, in a studio, in a control location like this camera is spectacular. And it does everything that my X-H2S does in a studio like this. Of course, it doesn't do the 4K 120 and all of that, but I barely use that. I use it once every so often, and it's not in the studio. So for a studio like this, I could get basically the same performance that I get out of my X-H2S that is recording me at a third of the price. And on a camera that is small, lightweight, and easy to carry. Not only that, with the price of an X-H2S, I can purchase this camera and a set of lenses. I can purchase 3 of these cameras and get a multi-angle setup if I want to. A front camera, a side camera, and a top camera. With the same price, you would get a much more enticing content, assuming you have the time to edit it, but that's a different story. So for a studio like this camera is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal camera. I also used it as a webcam during a podcast that I recorded with a friend of mine, and it performed flawlessly as well. But the good thing is, once you're done with all of that in your studio, you just can remove it from your tripod, take 2 small lenses, make it in a super small bag, get out and start shooting street photography. No one's gonna notice you, no one's gonna think you're a professional, no one's gonna really say you anything. Someone may be pissed, but realistically no one's gonna tell you anything because they won't believe that you are a professional shooting, stealing their soul. Or, thanks to its hot shoe, again something that other competitors don't have, you can take it as a secondary camera, as a primary camera, to a studio setup and shoot with it and get incredible result with a super small and cheap setup. And like in this case, it was that camera and the Viltrox 56 millimeters f 1.7. Less than $1,000 and you get spectacular results. Of course, the price of flashes and all of that, that is aside because it will be the same regardless of the camera. But you can get incredible results. You can take it to a birthday party and shoot photos and videos and make everyone happy. You can basically do everything you can think of and then some with such a small camera like this. And then to Scott's size, weight, and performance, you don't have to think whether you want to bring it or not. You just pack it in a super small bag, take it with you. If you use it, you use it. If you don't, you don't. It's not going to weigh you down. It's not going to feel like you have to produce the best content of the world. It's just going to be there. It's going to be your photography notebook when you're getting out. It's just that good. And that's where, in my opinion, the marketing somehow failed, because this camera is so much more than just a vlogging camera. It's a proper hybrid camera, which happens to be super portable and fun and easy to use. Now, when you consider the competition, it's easy to realize how unique this camera is, because in my opinion, this is by far the best choice you currently have, and by a huge margin, for someone looking for a small portable hybrid camera. Of course, unless you don't absolutely need a viewfinder, which we discussed at the beginning of the video. Because the real competition is really, really limited in many areas. Now, the obvious competitor is the Sony ZV-10 Mark II. It's a camera that shares the same form factor, almost the same size and weight. The Fujifilm is a little bit smaller and is a bit lighter. And they probably share the same sensor, meaning that the silicon is the same. Then Fujifilm adds its own X-trans layer, but that is just a layer. I believe the silicon below the layer is the same. And they also share very similar video specs, with the Sony having some tricks up its sleeve. They're coming from the higher end cameras, and the Fujifilm adding the 6.2K open gate that is a big thing for some users. While the autofocus on the Sony is among the best, and there's no discussion about that, the X-M5 is no slouch, is very, very good. And for the price range, we're up to the point where like cameras this price a while ago would suck. Their autofocus would be horrible. Nowadays, we get cameras in this price range that can autofocus like champ. And this one, as well as the Sony probably a little better, they do way, way more than whoever's going to use it for the first time is going to be capable of doing. So yeah, I wouldn't be worried about the performance from an autofocus standpoint. The issue is we have discussed only about the video part of it. When it comes to photography, that's where Fujifilm blows the Sony out of the water, because the Fujifilm X-M5 has a proper mechanical shutter, which means it's a proper photo camera that also happens to be a great video camera. Because with the mechanical shutter, you can use flashes, you can use at decent speeds. You can use flash on the ZV-10 Mark II, but I believe you're limited to weird flash sync speed. I guess it's 1/30th, which is very, very, very weird. And in general, you have less issues with rolling shutter, less issues with everything, because the mechanical shutter is meant to be there for photography. So while the Fuji is a proper hybrid camera, the Sony happens to be a video camera that happens to shoot some decent pictures. And that's a big difference. The other competitor in the same style of camera range is the Panasonic S9. Now that camera, as a video camera, has more advanced features, and it's also stabilized, and it's hosting a full frame sensor. However, the camera costs twice as much. And it's while it can take pictures, it was not made for that. You just have to figure out that It doesn't even have a hot shoe, it does have a cold shoe. So if you want to use flashes, you just couldn't. You just cannot use flashes with that camera. So if you want to use that camera as a secondary camera to your main camera, for photography, no go. Same thing goes for the Sony. With the Fuji, if you want to use it as a second or third camera to the main camera, you can do all of it. You can do everything that you want. If you take the form factor out, another camera that can be competing in this price range is the brand new Nikon Z50 Mark II. That camera has a viewfinder, which is going to be a big thing for some, but also it's way, way bigger and way, way heavier than the X-M5. I wouldn't even consider it a competitor because if you're looking for something this small, the Nikon is not going to cut it. As well as the Canon R100, R10, I don't remember those two cameras. They're bigger, they're heavier, they are DSLR lookalike. So in conclusion, the Fujifilm X-M5 is a heck of a camera. It is probably the best bang for your buck camera that you can purchase today. It's a competent video and photo shooter. It could easily become my main YouTube studio camera. It covers all my needs and then some for an environment like this. Of course, it wouldn't become my main camera for shooting professional photography or professional video, but as a secondary camera, as a backup camera, as my main YouTube studio camera that I just purchased and leave it at home for that, it would work perfectly, or something that I use in studio and then take it out to go doing street photography, it would work perfectly. And so this camera can be a lot of things. It can be a studio camera, it can be a video camera, it can be a street photography camera, it can be a camera that you bring for travel, it can be a camera that you bring wherever you want, whenever you want, just because it's inexpensive, small, compact, and it doesn't even scream, look at me. And I entered this review expecting some kind of a meh reaction because I thought it was not going to be for me. Well, I was wrong, as you can tell from my enthusiasm. I'm thinking about purchasing one and restructuring my kit. However, that is a conversation for a whole nother video. This video would last way too long if I had that conversation here, but I believe this camera is that good. Thank you for watching, guys. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one.